We are in chapter 8, and all of spiritual practice is about mindfulness, about living in mindfulness. What is that? That is the skill and the art of observing and being alert and vigilant to see whether the mind is wandering in flimsy matters, or it can be employed, the mind, whether it can be employed to contemplate on things that need serious attention from us. Okay, so what are the things that require serious attention from us? And that is to be vigilant to see, is my mind wandering in past glories of myself? That is vanities. We are vain, and that vanity takes away, abducts our presence of mind, our humility, and our grace and our selflessness. All that is abducted by our small vanities of, oh, I can do this and I am that and this is my personality. How does it make a difference? Are we making a difference to the world? That's the question. We need the mind to be employed in the contemplation of seeing and observing whether the mind is slipping in calm, in desires and wishes which are dragging us into this and that object of sensory pleasure in the world, and everything will attract. Is my mind reacting in krodh, in anger? Is it reacting in irritation? What is it reacting to? Is it now slipping into envy when I see something that I wanted and someone else has it before me? And am I slipping into jealousy? Am I slipping into arrogance? This is what requires the attention. My mind has to be employed in watching the kama, krodha, mada, lobha, moha, matsarya, because these are the 6 enemies of spiritual life. Now, if there are enemies in your life, you are not going to go and if you know that they are your enemies, you are not going to hobnob with them and go out on a weekend with them and say, okay, let's go out on a Friday night and let's have a good time together. No, you're not going to entertain them. In fact, you're going to avoid them if you know they are your enemies. That's what we do with people and objects and situations which are not pleasurable and not pleasant and maybe not even safe for us. And we are aware of those, and therefore we keep away from them. But do we consciously keep away from the real enemies, which the scriptures have always announced from the rooftop are kama, krodha, mada, lobha, moha, matsarya, desire leading to anger, envy, arrogance, greed, and vanity, and attachment. Yes, I found this, I got it, I had the desire and I got it, now I must keep it. That is also raga, attachment, and dvesha, so aversion to some objects and people. Raga, dvesha, and these other 6 enemies, if we know them and we are aware, we can watch them, and that is the only time that we can correct the course of our life. There's no other point at which we can correct the course, no matter how many scriptures we read, no matter how many verses we read, no matter how many commentaries and books, and there's so much of literature, spiritual literature and videos and audios. Yes, and if they give us a kind of intellectual pleasure or an intellectual, let's say, upliftment, so much the better. But at the end of it, there has to be a constant contemplation. Where am I? Where am I in all this? That contemplation can be done only by the self. Now, whatever gets measured, that means observed, gets done. This is a famous corporate phrase. That whatever is going wrong in the corporate, they say, okay, observe and measure it next time and show me the graph, what's going up and what's going down, what's selling well, what's not selling well, why is this particular brand more popular in this area. Please observe, measure it and show me the graph. Every manager does it. Okay, so we are the managers of our own spiritual life. But that also requires the same kind of rigor in observation, measuring and correction. So what gets measured gets done. That's what they say in the corporate. Now, it is said in verse 22 of chapter 8 that we cannot afford to let that mind slip or into forgetfulness. This mind which is busy in and through all the activities and duties and functions and commitments. In and through it, one is training the mind. This requires training. One is training the mind to be able to observe anyway. And when do we do it? So verse number 22 in chapter 8 says, Purushah parah partha bhaktya labhyasva nanyaya ananyaya. It has to be done at all times. So it's not as if I keep a time out for it. Maybe in the beginning I do. At the end of the day we say, okay, let me see how the day went and where all did my mind wander and what all did I bring in from the world into my mind. What are the emotions and ideas that I allowed to invade my mind right through the day. Okay, you can also do a self-check of that fashion. And later, like a yogi or a muni, it becomes part of the swabhava, the mind, to be ever vigilant, ever alert, observant, contemplative and responsive to what's going on inside. That's the quality of mind which is refined and evolved spiritually. We can aim for it. Why not? For example, you can say, oh, I don't know how it feels, Krishna, to be ananyaya. That means to do it all the time, to have that vigilance all the time. No. Krishna says, I don't believe you because in your worldly matters, I have seen you be ananyaya in the worldly matters. For example, a shopkeeper. A shopkeeper who welcomes you into his shop, maybe a jewelry store, and then he makes small talk with us and he says, okay, how's the family? Nice of you to visit us. How have you been? And may I offer you some coffee? And he makes small talk and makes you comfortable. And while he is making this courteous conversation, what is there at the back of his mind? So at the back of his mind is the thought, and it is constant. It is ananyaya, as to what is the kind of purchase I'm going to make. What is the kind of the extent and the quality, and what is it that I really am going to buy from his shop, and how much of the new product that he can offer to me. What is it that he can offer? He's trying to gauge my taste, my ability to pay up, whatever. So all that is going on at the back of the shopkeeper's mind. Why? Because it's been trained to be dwelling in profit and loss. And nothing wrong with it, that's his business, but that's an example I'm giving. So if we are training our minds that we want to know where our minds are wandering, whether it is wandering in the material, non-spiritual aspects, okay, just watch it. So it's like my pet dog. I have to keep it on a leash, right? So what is the predominant thought? Only I can watch. And therefore it says ananyaya. So that also leads me to another thought which has been expressed in verse number 23, chapter 8. That thought is about what is the kind of road we choose on this earth, in this life, in this human form. What are the roads we choose, and then where do they lead us? So verse 23, yatra kale tvanavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha prayata yanti tam kalam vakshami bharatarshabha. So at the time, there are two paths, of course. There are yogis who take the path from which there is no return. We'll explain what that means. The path taken, the spiritual path, of course, which means that it can lead you to a point of liberation where there is no return. So it is a one-way highway. You just go to the end of it and that's it. And the path from which you have to return. Are we on that highway which loops right back? So there are some highways where you go down about 100 kilometers and then there is a T-junction and a city has cropped up right there and it loops right back and you come right back to square one. Have you taken that kind of a crazy highway which loops back? What does it mean actually? It simply means, in material terms, how have we, material and spiritual terms, how have we ordered our lives and how have we subliminally influenced our next generation, for example, on the topic of success, let's say. Okay. So the topic of success for the younger generation and for us as we were growing up, was only simple. It was, if you have status and if you have salary, a high status and high salary, your measure of success is directly proportional to these two. Simple. And we accepted it, and we moved along that, because there was no other guidance. And if we don't offer any other guidance, successive generations will also grow up thinking that success is measured by high status, high salary. Okay, now in the Shastras they say, yeah, sure, of course you need these two. Why not? Because there are 4 Purushartha, as we all know. The 4 Purushartha, or the efforts of humans, are Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. So in between are Artha, which means to generate wealth and to earn money, and Kama is to enjoy certain pleasures, because we have been given senses and 3 gunas. So there is a proportion, there is a kind of proportion in which this has to be enjoyed. Artha and Kama, generation of wealth and enjoyment of pleasure, are there as Purushartha, but they are they are only half of the total Purushartha. The total Purushartha is Dharma on one side and Moksha on the other side. So all the actions that we do in Artha and Kama have to be hedged in by Dharma. Dharma on one side, the pillar standing, saying that, whatever you do in Artha and Kama, make sure it is righteous, that it is ordered by right action. No, don't go overboard. Even excess of anything is not righteous. And the other end of the spectrum is Moksha. So our Artha and Kama is hedged in by Moksha. Moksha means, I want liberation. Now, what we have done in our lives is that we have given an undue importance and disproportionate importance. In fact, it is like a single pointed aim of all our generations, that I have to have Artha and Kama, success and status, and that's when people will recognize me, and I will gain my Kirti, Kamini, Kanchan, and therefore I will be respected. And my entire self-worth is drawn, and self-identity is drawn from these two. Now, if this is the impression we are giving to human beings, then we are doing a great deal of disservice to their human life, because human life cannot be reduced to Artha and Kama, which is like 80-90% of our lives. What about Dharma? Yeah, okay, so I will do a little bit of charity, and I will have I will make sure that the Artha and the Kama that I am enjoying is not by foul means. Okay, right? But Moksha, well, it's not even on the horizon. So where is the human life headed? It's not balanced. And in the olden days, just like the ashram, that is the stations, 4 stations of life, was to balance human life. It doesn't mean you can't have the life of pleasures and family and enjoyment. And yes, that is the Grihastha ashram of 25 years. We have been given the right proportion to enjoy everything. But there is a disproportionate emphasis on just Grihastha ashram. I may be 80, 85, and I may still be called in to babysit my grandchildren and to do this or that, and this is happening everywhere. But my Grihastha station, let's call it the Grihastha station duties, are technically over according to the Shastras. Why? Because I have a duty to myself after Grihasthi to go into Shastras and learning. And my 25 years have passed long time back, but I'm still in Grihasthi and worrying about my son's next promotion and maybe the transfer from one multinational to another, maybe relocation to another city, and maybe a new house. I'm worrying and dwelling, my mind is dwelling on all the things that my son's Grihasthi should be dwelling on. Yes, my son and daughter have a Grihasthi, and the daughter should be thinking of those Grihasthi things. Why am I getting into it? It's not my Grihasthi. But unfortunately, it's just a matter of disproportionate emphasis on the Purushartha, which is being emphasized. So that's why we have been told in verse 12, Sarvadvarani samyamya manohridi niruddhya cha. There comes a time when we have scattered ourselves and actually squandered our abilities, subtle abilities and spiritual abilities out into the world. That world, which will change anyway. So it doesn't matter what job or what salary or what house or what, it's going to change anyway. I have to give it up. And we will move the city, and when my daughter or son gets another house, I will move. My old house is going to be up for sale. Everything that I was anxious about is going to change. Okay, but Sarvadvarani Samyamya. Why? Yesterday we talked about why is it that there is so much of censorship of dwelling in the material world, and the logic we found was quite simple. And the logic we found was that everything out in the world is made up of matter. This is gross not in the American sense of awful, as they use it now in modern parlance, but gross in the sense of made up of matter, inert material, jad vastu. So everything in this world is gross, and my seeking after it is making my mind gross. It's making my mind dull as the gross objects in which my mind dwells. So what am I doing at the end of it? My mind is not sharpened enough, made subtle enough to be able to grasp the subtle truth, and the truth is subtle. So if I'm dwelling too much in the gross, my mind already has shaped itself to be too gross to grasp the subtle, and then we say, oh, that truth is not for me, I'm not ready for it. Yes, readiness doesn't come. So I'm tempted to quote a little bit of science over here. I have not read too much into it, but let me share what I have read about meditation. Why meditation? Because it is the very task of meditation to pull us out, to lift us out of the engagement with the gross world. Gross world meaning the world of matter, and to uplift it into the subtle. It's only meditation that can do it. How? Because science has found, an experiment has revealed that the texture of the brain changes with meditation. Which part changes? The prefrontal lobe. The prefrontal lobe, which is the part of the brain right behind the forehead, right behind our forehead, is the prefrontal lobe. I'm sure we all know about it. They have found that those Buddhist monks, or even those ordinary people who meditate a lot, twice a day or 2 hours a day, or to that extent, the prefrontal lobe was thicker, stronger. Okay, so what implication does that have? Okay, if it is stronger, it means that there is a special chemical called dopamine, which is being released in that area. Okay, so what is the significance of that? Now comes the real part, and this is science. I'm not even quoting the scriptures. Here they have found that dopamine is responsible to influence 3 factors in human development. The one is, dopamine is responsible for the ability of the individual to focus. And dopamine is responsible for the ability of the human mind to distinguish between right and wrong, or as I said, Shreyas and Preyas, what is right and what is pleasurable. Simple things. Sat and Asat. Anything to be able, that means it's a cognitive area that dopamine is touching. Cognitive, intellectual. And it has the ability to actually resist impulse. Can you believe the import of this? To be able to resist an impulse, because the moment we have an impulse to do something, we may be getting into a gross area. But that prefrontal lobe is the area of the brain, if it has been strengthened, it's going to process that impulse and say, hey, do I need to do this? Is it leading to my main goal, or can I afford to drop it? Prefrontal lobe dopamine is responsible for 3 actions which are the sole domain of human behavior. Otherwise, the behavior is very, very primary, very sensory, and very gross, as in the animal kingdom or the caveman, the rest of the brain. So the brain, if you see the structure of the caveman, the structure of the skull, I mean, you will say, oh, but he did have a big head. Yeah, the skulls are larger than our modern human skulls. And that means even the brain it held was large inside. Yes. contrary to some of the quotations. Yes, it was large, but which part of the brain was large? So it was the amygdala, which is at the base of the, at the back, at the top of the spine. That amygdala is the part of the brain which is responsible for pure primary impulsive action. Are we living in primary impulses? No, we have to be first human and then spiritually a higher human. So even among humans we have to be spiritually higher. Well, the bottom line is meditation, the one skill, the one and sole skill that we can hang on to like a straw to a drowning man, to say, yes, I have to hang on to this, otherwise I cannot lift myself out of the ocean of gross world of matter, temptations of matter. And therefore the very structure, the very chemical composition of the brain has been known to change with meditation. And this is empirical experiment that I am quoting. So moving from the gross, from the material to the subtler is possible, and it has been proven. Okay. What is that subtle then? Okay. So number 21, the 21st verse said, Avyakto kshara ityuktaha. Okay, it is that avyakta, unmanifest, which I cannot see with my gross senses. I cannot grasp with a very material mind which is dwelling all the time in the material objects. No, that mind and that kind of sensory perception will not be there. It is that one unchanging truth which does not have the nature of knowing grief or pain or sorrow. How do you know? Because when I was in deep sleep and when I was in very, very deep meditation, at that point in time, there was no remembrance of my financial collapse or a failed relationship or the anxiety about new admissions, new jobs for the family, about what am I cooking tonight, or there was no sorrow, because that consciousness, that subtle, supreme, unchanging being was my being. So there are 4 states. So we are in waking and deep sleep and dreaming and deep sleep, and the 4th is just being, Turiya state. That unchanging is me. To experience that subtlety, we need the prefrontal lobe to be stronger with meditation, to release dopamine so I can focus. Now focus here means have the ability to have vairagya. Scientists will not use the word vairagya, no problem. Our rishis have used it. Vairagya means when you focus on the right things, and the ability to distinguish, vivek, and then to be able to resist sensory temptations. All this has been said in the scriptures. That constant, that unchanging is me, in and through all the experiences. So it says further in verse 21, Tamahuf paramam gatim, that they say is the highest goal of human existence. That they say is the highest goal. Who says? The rishis. Now, there are 2 paths leading, one towards this goal and one away from the goal, and it doesn't need rocket science anymore to figure out which is which. So, but I'm still going to go through verse number 23. Yatra kale tvanavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginah prayatayanti tam kalam vakshami bharatarshabha. At the time of departing, yes, yatra kale, at the time, yogis, they are only yogis who go to the first path. That first path is the path which is inward looking. The inward looking, that one who can recognize the subtlety, recognize that there is one unchanging self, who is observing. I can remember my childhood, and I can remember the time I was very angry. I can remember the time that I broke up with an old friend. I can remember the time that I did some kind of charity and made someone else happy. Now all that is a remembrance of the same personality, but acting in such different ways, such diverse ways. But that one who is observing all these diverse, contradictory, paradoxical actions is not changing, because he is the observer. How do you know he is the observer? Because the thing which is being observed cannot observe itself. Has to be another observer, and that observer doesn't grow old, it doesn't grow into youth, it doesn't get diseased. So right now, am I suffering from health problems? Yes, my body is suffering from health problems and from certain kinds of joint pain or headaches. But that consciousness, is it? No, it doesn't know disease, it doesn't know youth, it doesn't know old age, it doesn't know grief, it doesn't know anxiety, it doesn't know sorrow, and it doesn't know death. It's not its nature. So one path is leading us inward towards the mission of seeking that imperishable self, our real nature, our eternal consciousness, our vrittim. That person, that path does not return again and again to this earth to face the same drama all over again. Our vrittim. That's the big promise of this goal. If we make that our goal, then the big promise is that we don't return to this finite embodiment, which is doing all the suffering and all the joys and sorrows and ups and downs. This roller coaster is being felt by this embodiment, not me, not the real me. And therefore, and of course, you have the other path. And that's wide open. The doors are wide open to the second path. And what is that path? The extroverted life, the extravagant life. Why extravagance? Because it's not only in terms of money that we are extravagant. We are also extravagant. That means too loosely spending our mental and physical energies, our the fine, subtle, sophisticated abilities to see the truth, squandered extravagantly into the world. That is also our extravagance. We are leading a life of extroverted extravagance. What is the purpose of that? So if the purpose of the inward life, the whole mission is to seek our own imperishable, the real self, then what is the purpose of this extroverted life? I don't think we have even considered it. Everyone is into it, so I am also into it. But basically what it is doing, this extroverted life, is to satisfy our ego. Our ego is being happily satisfied in wandering merrily in the flickering joys of the world. Why flickering? Because they are not going to be there forever. Every sensory joy in the world has three problems. They are temporary joys. They leave you dissatisfied at the end. They are changing. Whatever one has gained begins to sour after some time, and it creates a dependence. If I don't have that which made me happy at that point in time, that meaning it could be a relationship or an object or a situation, if I don't have that again, I'm so nostalgic for it and I miss it, so I'm not happy because it's not there. It's an emotional dependence. It creates dependence. Any joy creates dependence, and also it creates a hankering. The next time it is not there, I want more of it, so there is a trishna. These are the four poisons of joys. So joy which looks like a beautiful glass of wine, let's say, if I may make that silly comparison, it looks like a glass of sparkling wine, and when you drink it, it's actually that glass of wine which is tempting us is actually doing what? It is a slow poison. We don't even know that the poison is hitting us. It is so slow and subtle. And every time the joy which is now and gone later, we don't realize its temporariness. That is strange, because we should be able to say, if it doesn't stay with me, maybe it was not a permanent joy, so it's asat. No. But we don't seem to learn our lesson for some strange reason, which is a kind of a mental fix we are in. That the four poisons of every joy, its temporariness, its nature of becoming sour and changing, and its dependence, creating dependence, our dependence on it, and creating a trishna and hunger and hankering for it. All these poisons, we don't see it, we don't taste it, we are not even pre-warned about it. The Shastras are warning us about it and saying, okay, so this is what is pandering to your ego. Your ego feels good about leading a life like this, which is one of extroverted, unthinking extravagance. Yes, then the result is simple, that we come back over and over again. One highway loops back to this sansar and one highway goes straight up to God. So you can choose, and every day we have a choice to choose the inward life or the extroverted life. Once again, not to mistake the life of pleasure to mean that we have to become ascetics one fine night and take to the caves and shiver in the cold up in the Himalayas. There is no such extreme suggestion being made here at all. I think the Shastra is only suggesting that turn the quality of mind such that the hankering, that dependence on the joys outside stops. Doesn't mean that we stop enjoying. We are